afternoon. You'll have to excuse me, but I've been putting together a memory box for my daughter about the March of the Mill Children. Seems like just yesterday I was 12 years old and working in a textile mill in Philadelphia. I was working because my father had just died and we needed the money. It was horrible. Hour after hour I worked, climbing on the fast-moving machines and changing the bobbins that held the thread. I was one of many underage children in the factory. The age limit was 14, but the limit was not enforced. When inspectors came, the factory managers could bribe them to look away, so they wouldn't see us underage ones. If not, the manager might be arrested. We, the workers, were getting tired of the unfair treatment we got, but we didn't know what to do. Our answer came. Mary Jones came to Philadelphia in the spring of 1903. She wanted to organize a march for children. The march would be starting on July 7th and would go from Philadelphia to Oyster Bay, New York, where the president, Teddy Roosevelt, and his family were staying for the summer. I knew at once that I had to go. As soon as I got home, I rushed to my mother and begged her to let me go. She was doubtful, but finally I convinced her. So, on July 7th, 1903, I was with the marchers. The march was by no means easy. It was hot, dusty, and tiring, but we children loved the freedom of it. For almost the first time in our lives, we were satisfyingly full. But I was curious about why we were going to the president. Someone told me that Mother Jones, as we all affectionately called her, wanted to compare us with the president's children and wanted him to make a law stating that children under the age of 14 shouldn't be allowed to work. When I heard that, I hoped with all my heart that our crusade would be successful. 2 days after we started, we arrived to Bristol for a big meeting, and Mother Jones made a long speech. At the end, she passed around a plate for people to put money into. The money would be used to buy food and supplies for us. Some kind people actually gave us a whole wagon load of food. The crowd didn't give enough money to suit Mother Jones, so she scolded the crowd and passed the plate again. On and on we marched. We passed through Trenton, Princeton, Metuchen, Rahway, Patterson, and Hoboken. Some of the children were sent back because they stole. Mother Jones wouldn't stand for that. It was surprising how many people went back. On July 12th, only 5 days after we had started, there were only about 60 people left compared with the 200 we started with. Some of them had gone back because they were angry that Mother Jones got to ride in train cars and sleep in hotels. She only rode train cars to look for places for us to stay, but the complainers didn't care. Mother Jones scolded us and said that anyone who wanted to could go back. Nearly 100 did, but more came from Philadelphia to make up. But Mother Jones was still pushing on, no matter who went back. "A crusade is chiefly against child labor in mills," she said in one of her speeches, and I believed her. But the march was getting harder and harder. The route was 125 miles long, and it seemed to be taking forever. But as we marched, I learned a little about Mother Jones. She had come to Kensington, PA, in the spring of 1903, and had organized a meeting in Independence Park, near where 75,000 people were striking. The meeting was against child labor. Because of all the people striking, nearly 10,000 of them were children. On and on we marched. We skipped Manhattan because we didn't want to run into police. At almost every place we stopped, Mother Jones made speeches. She raged about the factory owners. Some of the nicer names she called them were dictator, tyrant, and cannibal. She said that the rich people's things were made by the poor working children and that this should stop. She told about how some of us were paid $1.50 a week, while others only 30 cents. On July 27th, we arrived at Coney Island. We paraded the streets with our signs and banners and an elephant leading the way. We had no trouble getting the people's attention. Mother Jones made a big speech right after an animal show. She put me and some of the other children in the empty animal cages to emphasize her point on how we had no freedom, but just had to work, work, work. We clung to the bars and looked out at the crowd. The next day, we got an offer for some of the men in our army, it wasn't just children, to do 2-day jobs to help pay expenses. They refused. So Mother Jones sent them back. So many refused, she sent back almost half our army. As we drew near to Oyster Bay, we were warned not to enter. The government was putting out police, secret servicemen, and detectives to keep us from the president. So Mother Jones sent us all back to Philadelphia, except for 3 boys. I was crushed. All that time on the road just to go back? But I still wanted to know what had happened. I soon found out. On July 30th, after 22 days on the road, nobody noticed 3 clean, well-dressed boys and an elderly lady board a train to Oyster Bay, then get into a closed carriage and ride to where the president was staying. Since all the police were looking for a whole army, they didn't suspect a thing. Mother Jones went to the president's secretary, Mr. Barnes, and asked for his help. She wanted him to write a letter to the president asking to set up a meeting. He said that she would have to write a letter to the president asking to set up a meeting. She said she would. She wrote the letter, but Mr. Roosevelt refused to answer. So again, she tried to meet with him, but he refused to discuss the matter of child labor with her. He said it was the business of each state to make that kind of law. Finally, Mother Jones gave up, but she was disgusted. She said later, "You fellows sure elect wonderful presidents." She also said, "Teddy was afraid of me." So was the march a failure? No. The march affected many of the people along the way, and in the following years, bills and acts were proposed or made. First of all, a National Child Labor Committee was formed in 1903. Then lots of bills started being proposed, bills stating that child labor should be stopped and the products made by child labor shouldn't be sold. One big triumph was in 1909, 6 years after the march, Pennsylvania made a law that children are not allowed to work until they reach the age of 14, and they reduced the maximum work hours to 58 a week instead of 60 a week. Then, in 1916, an act of Congress prohibited the interstate commerce of child labor products. But the biggest triumph of all was in 1938, when Congress passed the Fair Labor Standards Act. It set work hours to 40 hours per week and set 18 as the minimal age limit for working in factories. These acts did not affect us marchers. By the time the acts were made, we were old enough to work. But they affected our children and grandchildren. Today, my children can play and go to school because of these acts. They don't have to work. The reform of child labor practices took many years. But as Mother Jones said, our march has done its work.